What Representative Ocasio Cortez has done is kind of shared that, you know what? What really matters is me. What really matters is my feelings. What really matters is what I consider important at any one time. As a matter of fact, if people don't agree with me, well, then we shouldn't have courts. Now, you say to me, well, Tony, she said a lot of things, but she may not have said that. Oh, hello, hi. How are you? Tony Katz, Tony Katz today. What's going on? Find everything, tonykatz.locals.com. Just that easy to do. tonykatz.locals.com. Yes, indeedy. Yes, indeed. That's what Representative Ocasio Cortez has done. Representative Ocasio Cortez has stated as clear as day that if you don't agree with me, you don't count. Now, we've seen this play out in a lot of different ways in a lot of different places. Most famously, as we've discussed, it's very clear that for the political left, if you're black and conservative, you're not really black. And if you're gay and conservative, you're not really gay. And if you're Jewish and conservative, you're not really Jewish. And if you're a woman and conservative, well, we can't even tell you what a woman is. So how could you possibly be a conservative? They make these decisions that we somehow, or they somehow, are these arbiters of what is good and decent and rational, and they know best. And that if you don't agree with them, well, it's clear that you should not be listened to. It's clear that you should not be trusted. It's clear that we can pay no attention to you at all. There was a decision made on abortion. Actually, there were two decisions made on abortion. One comes from a judge in Texas who is known as a Christian conservative, and people actually seek out trying to get cases in front of him in order to get a friendly ear. And you say to me, that's terrible. Well, I would argue what would be terrible is certainly if he's not paying attention to the rule of law and he's paying attention to the rule of man. I'm not a rule of man kind of person. I'm a rule of law guy. We follow the law. And sometimes you don't like what the law has to say, and sometimes you work to change the law. But the last thing I want is to be under the gun of somebody's whim. Whims are absolutely terrible, horrific things. Whims don't give you a leg to stand on. Whims can be fickle. The law is here. It is understood. The Constitution being the basis for it all. Well, what this judge said is about an abortion drug called Mifepristone. Mifepristone, Mifepristone. That this was improperly, by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, this was improperly not only introduced, but this was improperly tested. And maybe the FDA shouldn't have the right to put this out into the world. It's a very, very interesting ruling, and it's an interesting ruling because this thing came out 20 some odd years ago. 2000 it got approved. It's 2023 for those of us playing the home game. What a weird thing, but interesting. You're saying, based on those who came before you and brought their case to you, that the FDA cut corners? Is that your argument? That they didn't go through the standard rigors of testing before they decided this was okay? This was allowable? That is surprising, if not shocking. What an odd thing to hear, that after 20 some odd years, we would say of a drug that has been used in medication abortions across the country, yeah, that wasn't properly approved. We shouldn't allow that. Even I, a pro-life guy, would say, that's interesting. I think somebody fighting that would have a case. I think they'd have a legitimate case. It's going to go to the Supreme Court, right? Well, absolutely it is. Because first, this judge gave the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals 7 days, or gave the FDA, I should say, 7 days to appeal it to the Fifth Circuit Court, which, of course, the Justice Department already said is going to happen. And then there was another judge out there. I forget where they were. Eastern District of Washington issued a decision in a separate case to keep the status quo. So this judge in Texas says, no, 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 no. This judge in Washington State says, leave it alone, which means only one thing. It's going to the Supreme Court. We can leave it there. No, what we have to discuss is the response from Representative Ocasio Cortez. And I'll start with her appearance on CNN.
There has been thought, I believe, given to this. Senator Ron Wyden has already issued statements, for example, advising what we should do in a situation like this, which I concur, which is that I believe that the Biden administration should ignore this ruling. I think that we, the courts have the legitimacy and they rely on the legitimacy of their rulings. And what they are currently doing is engaged in an unprecedented and dramatic erosion of the legitimacy of the courts. The
legitimacy of the court is based on what? Whether you, Representative Ocasio Cortez, decide that the court is legitimate. And for those of you who think that I'm joking, that somehow I heard her wrong, she again with Dana Bash on CNN, man. Even Dana Bash was like, you're serious about this, that not only should Joe Biden, who's already said he's going to fight this, not only should Joe Biden not pay attention to the court, he should dismiss the court. As a matter of fact, the Supreme Court doesn't even have decision-making power over the FDA.
Should that apply if the Supreme Court upholds the Texas judge's decision?
I think one of the things that we need to examine is the grounds of that ruling. But I do not believe that the courts have the authority to have the authority over the FDA that they just asserted. And I do believe that it creates a crisis. Should the Supreme Court do that, it would essentially institute a national abortion ban, because you have an extraordinary amount of states who have implemented surgical bans or bans after very early time periods. And then if you pair that with a Mifepristone ban, then we will essentially have a ban on abortion. There are certain workarounds. I will admit there would be certain workarounds, but we would have taken a very significant step towards a national abortion ban.
Now, let's say there was a national abortion ban. That would be something, right? There was, until the overturning of Roe v. Wade, a national allowing of abortion. So there could be a national abortion ban. I don't think it's actually going to come to that. I do believe it should be left to the states. But what can I say? I'm old school in that regard. The FDA shouldn't be under the purview of SCOTUS. The Supreme Court should have no say whatsoever, none. They should have no say. That's insane. That's surreal. That's embarrassing to hear. That is a person who doesn't believe in the rule of law. That's a person who believes in the rule of Ocasio Cortez. She believes only in herself. As a matter of fact, she goes in a tear on this subject, saying again that Clarence Thomas being on the court, he went on this trip with this guy Harlan Crow, and so therefore he can't be trusted. This shows how illegitimate the court is.
Should the Justice Department investigate?
I believe what we're seeing right now is a breaking of the law, and we have to examine what institutions. I know that there are calls for Chief Justice Roberts to initiate an investigation. I do not think that this court any longer has the legitimacy, especially after the Supreme Court leak last year, which never came to a conclusion because the investigation itself that Chief Justice Roberts started back then, I believe is very discredited by naming a position that has an inherent conflict of interest because it is employed by those justices to pursue that investigation. I believe that and it is the House's responsibility to pursue that investigation in the form of impeachment.
Well, let me ask.
Impeachment Your argument is Clarence Thomas was the leak? That's a radical argument, although we all would like to know who the leaker was in the Supreme Court. That matters greatly. But my gosh, you're going to say that the entire court doesn't have legitimacy because you don't like how one judge in Texas ruled regarding abortion. What kind of fetishist are you? Exactly how weak are your morals? How low are your standards that you decide when I don't like something, it has to go away? If you really didn't like the court, what you would do as a member of Congress is move to get rid of the court, which is, of course, well within your rights to do. The only court that exists in the Constitution is the Supreme Court. All the other courts can be created. All the other courts can be done away with. Ain't no rules about them. Ain't no rules about them at all. Those courts can go. We can get rid of them right now. And I have argued numerous times that we should get rid of many of those courts. That's a different conversation than whether or not we listen to those courts. We have three co-equal branches of government, although admittedly, and I even admit this, the judiciary was never supposed to be this, Madison v. Marbury. I mean, that's a conversation maybe we need to go back to. But the idea that something in the Constitution does not have the ability to adjudicate cases involving an agency that doesn't exist in the Constitution at all is madness. That's nuts. And that's what you get from somebody who believes in the rule of law, not the rule of believes in the rule of man and not the rule of law. That's what you get from somebody who believes that they know better, that they are the value, that they are the important person, that they are the good person, that they are the decent person. They know best. You don't know best. They know best. And when you, as a member of the court, don't listen to them who know best, you have to go. You're the enemy. You're not trustworthy. You need to be impeached. What does Clarence Thomas have to do with any of this? Oh, by the way, we get why you hate Clarence Thomas. He's a black conservative. What? What? Am I not allowed to say that? Am I not allowed to notice that they hate Clarence Thomas because he's a black conservative? Am I not allowed to notice that they hate Clarence Thomas going back to how Joe Biden treated him at his confirmation hearing, which Clarence Thomas referred to as a high-tech lynching, and you better believe he was right. Ginny Thomas isn't allowed to have a political opinion? No? Not allowed. Good Lord. You hate him because he's a black conservative. You hate that. Admit who you are, Representative Ocasio Cortez. That's all I'm asking. I have grown used to, even if I find it despicable, your childlike policy position. Green New Deal is a childlike policy position. This is a childlike policy position. I didn't get what I wanted, so you have to go away. Dear Lord. You didn't do what I say, so I don't have to listen to you. That's it. That's your position, and that is the position of a child. But you don't like Clarence Thomas because you believe that if you are black, you have to believe something. And he believes something different. Sees the world differently. And therefore, well, not acceptable. And as many people on the left would state, not really black. There you have in Nashville. You have these two guys who are expelled. And by the way, the woman should have been expelled as well. And I don't know why that didn't happen. I think that's pretty ugly. You expel these two members for leading this riot on the Capitol there in Tennessee. One of the guys who got expelled said to a Republican member, this Democrat who got expelled, said to a Republican member who happens to be Indian, "You are putting a brown face on white supremacy." You see, he couldn't just see the world differently because of the color of his skin. He had to fall in line. And when he didn't fall in line, then, of course, it's okay to say he's in brown face. And he's a brown face for white supremacy. And he's a little bit confused. My God, the bigotry that comes from the political left is overwhelming. And for Representative Ocasio Cortez, I mean, it's beyond a conversation of bigotry. It is, I didn't get what I want. Stamp your feet, pound your fist, hold your breath, and say, do what I want or else. And to do that, you throw the conversation of illegitimate court out there. You believe we shouldn't listen to the Supreme Court or any court. You believe the Supreme Court doesn't have any ability to make rulings regarding FDA decisions. You're willing to throw away the entirety of the system, the entirety of the nation, the entirety of the rule of law because you didn't get what you want. That's what a child thinks. Problem is, you're a member of Congress. So we don't get to just dismiss you as a child. We have to treat you like the problem that you are. And that's going to mean not only winning the House for the future, it's going to mean winning the Senate. And it's going to mean some people in Congress who constantly push back against this child, engage in these childlike policies, because there are only so many childlike policies you can engage in before it's like, okay, you're the child. And people got to say it just like it is, because it is just like I said. Keep it here. I'm Tony Katz. And find everything here on Rumble, rumble.com/Tony Katz and TonyKatz.locals.com. Streaming during the radio show. Getting used to it. Well, bugs to fix, but I'm good for that. Guys, I'll catch you.